All right, so let's kick this off. So thanks a lot for everybody joining, which is our first webinar in South Africa to give people a little bit of an intro to Bitcoin, like a Bitcoin 101, but also a Luno 101. We know that digital currencies can be a little bit intimidating, and hopefully this will answer some of the basic questions that you have. But if you see there, point number 8, we will do a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, you'll be able to ask it here or via our social channels. So we can kick right off with a little introduction to Luno. I should probably start with who I am. Hi, everybody. So my name is Vanna, and I head up the marketing and communication side here at Luno. I'm very fortunate. I've been in the industry for quite a while. I bought my first Bitcoin back in 2013, right before the big crash. So I made some good money, and then I lost spectacular money back then. And obviously, the changes that we've seen over the past few years is just immense. So I spend most of my time in Cape Town, but now with Luno's recent expansion into Europe, I spend more and more time also in London. And if you want to go ahead and follow me there on Twitter, I tweet a lot about Bitcoin, and my opinions are my own. So this is some of the Luno team. As I was making these slides last night, I realized that we have about 6 new people that's not been added to this list. But it's a fast-growing company in a fast-growing industry. So where we were 3 years ago, we were 7 people sitting around a single table. Today we've grown into a huge company where we over 50 staff spread across 3 offices. Cape Town being the largest office out of them, where most of our development and customer support happens. But we also have an office in Singapore that takes care of the Southeast Asian market, and our London office, which is integral to our expansion into Europe. Also not pictured here is Team India. So we do a lot of our initial onboarding and customer support now with a full-time team of about 40 in India. But go ahead and go. There's links on on a lot of the slides. So just go to luno.com/about if you want to stalk and find out who the people are helping with your customer support queries and work sitting in the office on this side. Our investors. This is quite an important slide actually. The reason why I included it is whenever you interact with a Bitcoin company, you are entrusting those people with your money. So I think it speaks volumes, not just the team that you are, giving custody of your money to, but also the people that are actually backing them. So our first big backing came when our Series A was raised 2 years ago, and Naspers led that round. So that was about 50 million South African rand. I think it was like $4 million at the time. And we had some additional funding by the DCG, the Digital Currency Group in New York, and Ventura, which is based in Jakarta, Indonesia. And then a month and a half ago, we raised our Series B with Alpha Code, which is the fintech investment arm of RMI, and Boulderton Capital, which is the largest venture capital firm in the United Kingdom, with that money being very much earmarked for our European expansion. Okay, then, so let's get to what is Luno's goal. What are we actually trying to build here? And this is something that I return to time and time again, and I'll reference to it further on in the presentation. Is Luno tries to make it easy for people to buy, sell, and learn about digital currencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now, I know there's a lot of interest in digital currencies by banks and companies and hedge funds and the like, but our goal is not really to focus on that segment of the market. Our goal is on consumers. We want to make it easy for people. Then the other thing is we want to make it easy to buy, sell, and learn about Bitcoin or digital currencies like Bitcoin. So there's a lot of crazy new, and some of them are very interesting, altcoins and ICOs on the market. That falls within the broader spectrum of digital currencies. But our focus is very much on the big one, on Bitcoin, and to an extent and on Ethereum, which I'll mention at the end. But of course, Bitcoin is a great bridge into other currencies. So once you have an account with Luno, it actually enables you to do a lot of things, albeit on other platforms. Okay, so for today's presentation, we will only focus on the Luno wallet. Luno Wallet is 90% of the work that we do. It's 90% of our effort in terms of expansion of where we want to be. And it's very much in line with our goal. We want to make it easy for people, for consumers, to buy, sell, and learn about Bitcoin. So if you haven't already done so, so that's how I'm saying so, please go ahead and download the app. If you don't have an Android or an iOS device, or you don't have space to download it, you can also just go to www.luno.com and sign in from there. The features are the same. The other two products that we won't touch in this presentation are the Luno Exchange and the Luno API. So the Luno Exchange is a platform for advanced traders to buy and sell and trade Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the Luno API is an integration solution for businesses who, for instance, want to accept Bitcoin on their websites. But for purposes of this presentation, we'll just be focusing on the Luno wallet and how to use that. Okay, then part number 2, what is Bitcoin? This is one of the highest search terms on Google. If you go to Google Trends, you will see, particularly in South Africa, a lot of people seem to be interested in Bitcoin. So I'm going to break it down into 3 little steps of what Bitcoin is, and then we will talk about why that actually matters. So first off, Bitcoin is a new type of currency. And in a second, I will explain why it is actually a currency and what it shares with other currencies. It is a currency that only exists in digital form. So it's not, there's no physical representation of it. There's no banknotes or coins. Even though it's called Bitcoin, it's not a physical coin. And confusingly enough, a lot of times in the media, you will see pictures of little gold Bitcoins, but those are just a graphic designer's representation of what it is. So it only exists in digital form, and it isn't owned or controlled by a single person, company, or government. Now that is probably the most important part of what Bitcoin is, and you'll often hear the word decentralized, and that's basically what decentralized means. Is it's not owned by one person, meaning you can't really kill it. Okay, so let's look at why Bitcoin is currency. Let's look at what is currency. So currency has obviously evolved throughout the years, but it generally shares these characteristics. So it's an item that is scarce. So for instance, we don't value rocks as a instrument of exchange because it's everywhere. But maybe some people might value gold because it's limited in supply. So Bitcoin is scarce. There's a limited amount available. And again, at the bottom of your screen, you can see the learning portal that has more resources on this. But it is scarce. The second thing is it needs to be durable. It's no use if you have money, but it disintegrates after using it a few times. So Bitcoin is very durable because it's digital. It basically can't be destroyed. It is portable, so you want to be able to carry the coins or the cards in your pocket, from one shop to another without lugging around a wheelbarrow of coins or gold. And that's the same with Bitcoin. Currency needs to be divisible. This is a question that we often get when people ask, well, a Bitcoin right now is 121,000 Rand. How can I afford it? But Bitcoin is divisible. If you want to pay just a fraction of a cent, you can do that. There's a lot of decimals after the comma. It should be unique or free from counterfeit. So this is the reason why we spend so much money to make sure that we've got watermarks in our South African Rand notes, and that nobody else has the ability to just print more money other than the government. And that is the same with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is unique. You can't copy and paste it like you can with any sort of, or with most other digital items. It needs to be transferable. Of course, if I need to pay you for goods and services, or I need to pay you back, a restaurant tab at the end of the night, I need to be able to easily transfer it from person to person. And Bitcoin shines at that because I can transfer money from me to the other side of the table, but I can also transfer it to the other side of the world with basically the same amount of effort. And currency is also fungible. Now it's a bit of a strange word, but basically when we had the barter system, people would trade, let's say oranges, a bag of oranges for a chicken. But the problem is that Oranges aren't fungible because you have, better yield. Some are sweeter, some are smaller. Whereas money needs to be fungible. If I get $1 or a rand today and I give it to someone else, that needs to be the exact same rand. And Bitcoin shares that characteristic. The last one that's probably up for debate is Bitcoin widely used, but to be a currency, something should be widely used. Now, early on in Bitcoin days, this might not have been the case, but right now, Bitcoin is extremely widely used, and it's widely traded, and it's widely accepted all around the world. Again, on our learning portal, and there's some links coming later, we will show you some places where you can use Bitcoin. Okay, so we had a look at Bitcoin having the characteristics of currency. Now we need to look at it existing in digital form. And to a lot of people, that's a little difficult to comprehend, because money to them, at least the way we grew up, is it's something tangible that you can see and understand and trade with. But we'll look a little bit at the evolution of money and why it's quite logical that we reach this point. Okay, so the evolution of money, and there's a nice Wikipedia article at the bottom there that you can follow. So initially, way back when, as mentioned earlier, people used to barter. They would trade, a bag of oranges for some chickens, but that worked really well when you could always interact with people directly. But as commerce grew, it was not always practical to carry a bunch of chickens or oranges around, and maybe you wanted something completely different. So we needed something that was universally used and accepted that it had value. So from the barter system, basically, we moved over to stones and shells and salt and skins, where people would carry those things around, and they signified a certain amount of wealth that the person had, or trading value. The skin thing was actually up until quite recent. That is why we call American dollars bucks, is because it used to represent a buck hide, the skin of an animal. But from there, things evolved, and certain companies or private banks started issuing, and monarchies started issuing coins, and they said this coin should be worth, X, as much as decreed by that institution or by that government. And later on, people realized, well, coins are great because they're durable, but you can fit a lot more money onto a note, and so notes were born. Another important step in the evolution of money, and more recently, is governments used to have their money supply backed by gold. So if I gave you 10 rand, the government decreed that there was 10 rand somewhere in a vault that the bearer of that note actually had claim to. Now we moved off the gold standard, and won't get into the discussion about it. Some people say it's a good thing. It's actually a great thing for economies. But we moved to a place where banks started issuing money. So banks would get permission by governments. So it's really the government that issues money, and that's where the current supply of money comes from. But even just in the last few years, there's been a lot of evolution in that too, because we moved from bank-issued money, which might have been in notes, and even checks, if you think how ridiculous that is. At least in my lifetime, I remember that we had checks, and they're still widely used in America. But right now, a lot of our money that we use would be digital. It doesn't necessarily mean digital currency. It doesn't necessarily mean cryptocurrency. But if you think something like PayPal, where you can pay somebody without needing to actually use physical cash to do so, or when you use your credit card, that's also digital money, because the money moves from your bank account to someone else's bank account, and it's the settlement of a ledger. It's not actual physical money that is changing hands. And the vast majority of money that we have and use today in the existing financial system is actually digital. So it's not too crazy to think that we could use a money, if not today, maybe in the future, that only exists in digital form. And Bitcoin is a money like that. Okay, the third thing about what Bitcoin is, we saw that it's a currency. We understand that it forms part of an evolution of money. And this is the part that is very, very important. That Bitcoin is not owned or controlled by a single person, company, or government. So in my example earlier, when you have, let's say you have a company like PayPal or Amazon, or even, let's say, eBucks, that entity can issue money, or they can facilitate the transfer of money. But you and I always need to trust that entity that they are actually going to take the money from my account and move it to your account, which is great. And it works in a lot of instances. We have companies like that. Companies like that are also banks. That is their purpose. But it is quite important to note that you, with a decentralized or something that's not controlled, can technically not be taken down. So if you have a central bank, you need to trust that bank with your data, or a company like PayPal. You need to trust them with transferring that value. But if something happens to that entity, it affects you because and the counterparty, because everybody has to trust that system. So Bitcoin brings us to a point of where trust is not required, which is a very, very powerful thing. And it's the first time in the evolution of money that you can have the transfer of money without a central entity, without needing to trust a central entity. Okay, let's have a little look at how that works. So traditional payments, or the barter system, let's say we have Alice there on the left and Bob on the right, and Alice wants to pay Bob 100 Rand. She will just hand him the money. That works really well. But in our international age, we want to deal with people in other buildings and cities and countries. So we traditionally rely on banks. So let's say Alice and Bob are in fact with the same bank. Let's just say, FNB, or you call it Bank A. What would happen is Alice would tell her bank, hey, I'm sending an EFT to Bob. And all that the bank does is it says, okay, Alice has an account with us, Bob has an account with us, so we'll take 100 Rand from Alice's account and we'll add 100 Rand to Bob's account. And that works pretty well. Again, both of us need to, Alice and Bob need to trust that the bank will honor the transaction and won't cheat the system. But it's in the bank's best interest not to cheat the system, because they would only exist when everybody trusts them. Now, things get a little bit more complicated already with the next step. Let's imagine Alice is with FNB, but Bob is with Standard Bank, or let's call it Bank A and Bank B. What happens with an interbank payment is the banks actually have accounts with each other. So Alice would go to her bank, Bank A, and she would say, okay, I want to send it to Bob. But Bob doesn't have an account with Bank A, but Bank A has an account with Bank B, and Bank B has an account with Bank A. So Alice's money goes to Bank B and then gets deducted again from Bank B's ledger of the Bank A account, and the money gets moved over to Bob. And this is, for instance, why we have that annoying 24-hour to 48-hour wait. You'll know when you make an EFT to somebody at a different bank. It's basically because the banks don't settle each transaction immediately between each other, but they do it at the end of the day. But you can already see how this doesn't work that well, because if you need to pay somebody immediately for goods and services that rendered, let's say Bob sold something to Alice, this introduces friction and delays into the system. Now, we also live in a world of multiple banks and multiple countries. Let's imagine Alice is in South Africa, but Bob is in America, and he sold her something that she bought on the internet, an MP3 or a movie. Now, international bank payments, all of these entities will actually have accounts with each other. And you can imagine the fees that come when you have the cardholder, which is Alice. Let's imagine she uses her credit card to buy it online. The cardholder will be connected with the card issuing bank, and we need to trust that bank. That bank would have an account with the credit card network, which often has an account with the transaction network. And the whole transaction network aggregates transactions for a country, and it goes through a central clearing mechanism. So that country actually has a clearing mechanism that links up to, it's often the SWIFT, but there's other international clearing mechanisms. So basically all of the transactions from South Africa going to the United States would clear together. And then once it's on the receiving side, on the American side, there's generally a merchant account that would process the incoming transaction, and a payment processor might be involved that facilitates the process between the two. And the acquiring bank, Bob's bank, would actually receive the money. And then once the money is in Bob's bank, they can send it over to the recipient, Bob. So you can see how quickly it brings a lot of complexity and a lot of points of failure. we are actually, even though when you just swipe your credit card or you use it online, the money immediately shows that it's gone, but it actually changes hands multiple times in the process. And we need to trust that all of these entities in the middle are handling our sensitive information, and that they have the right things in place and don't get hacked and leak that information somewhere. The other thing is just the time delay. If you make a bank payment from, let's say, South Africa to another country, it can generally take between 3 and 5 days for the money to arrive. And frankly, in our digital age, that is outrageous, particularly when something is digital. Like when you send an email, you don't think, oh, is it going to somebody in my same city or in my same country? You just send it. And that's basically what Bitcoin tries to solve, is to make payments quick and frictionless and remove a lot of these central entities in a payment. Okay, so let's have a look at how a Bitcoin payment actually works. So instead of a central entity having that ledger of being, this wallet has this much money or this account has this much money, Alice announces to the Bitcoin network there, she's saying, hey, I'm sending 100, we don't have to make it Bitcoin, that's a lot of money, but 100 Rand in Bitcoin, and I'm sending that to Bob. So when you make that announcement with Bitcoin, there's all these parties that we call Bitcoin miners on the network, and they all have a copy of this same ledger. Everybody can go and inspect and say, oh yes, Alice sent the money to Bob, Alice sent the money to Bob, Alice sent the money to Bob. And all that these miners do in the middle is they are verifying the transactions. They are keeping the system honest. They're making sure that Alice doesn't cheat. And then Bob also can see, hey, Alice's wallet has minus 100 and Bob's is plus 100. So in every 10 minutes, every ledger on the Bitcoin network gets updated, and everybody can see wallet A now has 100 less and wallet B has 100 more. And then should Bob want to send it to somebody else, the process gets repeated. The powerful thing with this and why decentralization matters is that even if you take one of the entities away, like that one at the bottom, there's still thousands of others on the network that will verify the transaction. And that keeps the system not just honest, but it keeps it reliable. There's no central point of failure. You announce a transaction to the network verifies that transaction, and the network earns a little bit of Bitcoin in facilitating that transaction. And that is basically why Bitcoin is unstoppable. There's a lot of, you can exert pressure on certain entities, and you can say, hey, you're not allowed to, to have a bank account if you want to use Bitcoin, which would be one thing, but nobody can actually stop the flow of Bitcoin between two people. It's an incredibly, incredibly powerful thing. And again, it's the first time in the history of money that something like this existed. Okay, so we see that Bitcoin is interesting and it's, forms part of this evolution of money, but, why do people actually use it? There's two core reasons. So first is that Bitcoin is used as a store of value, and the other reason is that it's used as a means of payments. And you will hear this over and over again in materials of like why people use Bitcoin. So let's first look at the payments bit. So in South Africa, you can use Bitcoin at a lot of places. We've got a link there at the bottom, and there's a lot of international retailers that accept it, or you can just send it to a friend if you owe them money. But the thing is, it's very early days for Bitcoin, and right now, Bitcoin payments are not super fast. It can take up to an hour, even longer, for the transaction to settle. So most people don't use it like that. The other thing is it's been steadily increasing in value, so people are a little bit hesitant to pay with it. If I buy something now for 1,000 Rand with Bitcoin, maybe that Bitcoin will be worth 2,000 Rand next year. Why would I use it? So the primary reason in South Africa, but also in other countries around the world, why people use Bitcoin is as a store of value. Now, why it makes a store of value is because it's limited in supply. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in circulation. That can't change. And there's demand for it. We can see that it has a use as a means of transfer. We can see that there's demand and recognition of it all around the world. And because more Bitcoin can't be printed, it opens up an interesting thought of, what would it be like in a world where you don't have inflation, or where money doesn't have inflation. The other thing that we see, particularly in some of our markets like South Africa, Nigeria, Malaysia, these are countries that have been hit quite hard by currency depreciation against the US dollar. So what we're seeing is that what investors do, they take a small percentage of their asset value on the investable money and put it in something like Bitcoin, because it has a track record of doing better against the US dollar. You'll often hear that it's called digital gold, and there's a very good book by Nathaniel Popper called Digital Gold that explores this a little bit more. But again, it's like gold. It's just not yellow and shiny. You can't keep it underneath your bed, but it shares a lot of characteristics. People value it. It's exchanged all around the world, and it's a little bit easier to carry around than gold. Okay, on to the price of Bitcoin, a very popular question, and the price of Bitcoin is determined just like gold or a Toyota Corolla or Apple's, and it is supply and demand. So on the one side, you have people who have Bitcoin and want to get rid of it. And on the other side, you have people, and maybe some of the attendees in this webinar, who want to buy Bitcoin because it's a store of value or it's a means of exchange. So there's supply and demand, and that's basically it. That is how, if the Rand today is 14 Rand against the dollar, it's because there are thousands of people buying and selling South African Rand with US dollar. And that basically sets the price. And if people believe that the Rand will be worth more in future, the exchange rate will drop. And if they think, well, the Rand's going to be worth less, it might move to 15. But it is, as with everything else, it is just people buying and selling that sets the price of anything. It's not centrally determined. If you want to see the price of Bitcoin, I took this screen grab last night. It was hovering around 122,000, 121,000, but you can go to luno.com/price. Okay, and I know a lot of you are interested in getting your own Bitcoin, and we'll get to our little giveaway in a second. But first up, what you would need to do is, or what you can do, sorry, to get Bitcoin is you can be a miner, but as you see from my thumbs down there, this is a very bad idea. It's very expensive to mine Bitcoin. You need specialized hardware, and there's a lot of Bitcoin mining scams. So I think that's a bad idea. The other way you can get Bitcoin is maybe you have a friend who can send it to you, or you provide services. You can ask your boss to pay you in it. You can sell things, but that's a little wishful. People don't really use Bitcoin for payments all that much, and your accounts department is probably going to deny your request if you want to get paid in Bitcoin instead of Rand. So the very easiest way to do it is just to use normal money, your local currency, and buy Bitcoin with it, and use a platform like Luno to do so. So there's only really 3 steps involved with buying Bitcoin with Luno, and the first you've already done, I hope, is you sign up for an account. The second step is you just need to make a deposit. Once you have signed up and entered your details, you can tap the Make a Deposit button, and we will provide you with some banking details. And then once you've made that payment and it shows up, you can use it to buy Bitcoin. So very briefly, if you're curious, like just open the Luno app or sign in on the website. Go ahead and select deposit money and make the online payment. It is very important that you use your unique reference number. So inside the Luno app, you will see a reference number that's unique to your account. If you use that when you make the EFT, we will automatically allocate the money. And once the money appears on your account, we will notify you. You'll get a notification in your app. You'll get an email from us, and then you can buy. So the only thing that you need to do when you buy is, again, you open the app, you select the buy button, and then you can say, oh, I want to buy Bitcoin. And you can say, I want to spend, for argument's sake, 100 Rand, or I want to buy 0.0001 Bitcoin. It's up to you to set the currency that you want to spend, or the currency that you want to receive. And we'll show you the final price that you can confirm, and you're done. You can literally buy it in seconds. The nice thing is we integrated with Standard Bank and FNB in South Africa. So if you make an EFT from those banks and you use your unique reference number, the amount usually reflects in a few minutes on your Luno account. Okay, we almost done here. The last little section is how to stay safe. Now, of course, I can drone on about how fantastic Bitcoin is, and you'll read a lot of optimism out there. But it's very important to take just a step back after you've gone down the rabbit hole and understand all of the things that can go wrong and might go wrong, so that you at least know about them in advance and you can prepare for them. So there's a few. The main things that I want you to consider is there's certain things that Luno can do to protect your money, but there's more things that you can and should do to protect your money, because we've never been hacked, but customers have definitely lost money because of bad security on their side. I'll get into that in a second. And the last one that is probably the most important is that you need to recognize that Bitcoin is a new technology. There's a lot of confusion. The market is very volatile, can move up and down in a very short amount of time. So just go slowly. Don't go overboard, as happy and enthusiastic as you might be. You can read up about Luno security on our security page. So it's down there at the bottom. Basically, what we do is we keep most Bitcoin offline. We keep it in what's called cold storage or deep freeze storage on our side. This means that even if Luno somehow got hacked, people won't have access to customer funds. And we periodically move money from that offline environment onto an online environment. But no one person can move that money. We use what's called multi-sig technology, where multiple people and an independent third-party custodian has to approve the movement of money into a hot wallet. We secure passwords and private information in hashed form. We have two-factor authentication available that sends you a one-time PIN before you can access certain types of data or transactions. The whole website is SSL secure. All data is encrypted. And again, no individual has access to customer funds. It's multiple people would need to coordinate to get anything done. And we also get a lot of independent security audits. Our investors have a lot of skin in the game, and they want to make sure that their name doesn't get thrown away. And we get security audits, so basically ethical hacking. Nobody's ever been able to break our systems, and we do these on an ongoing basis. The most important thing, as I mentioned, though, is not necessarily Luno's security, but what you can and should do. So there's two blog posts linked at the bottom. We will email this to all the attendees, but make sure that you secure your email account. If somebody has access to your email account, they can get access to other accounts because they can change passwords that way. The same goes for social media accounts. And when you have a password on any website, but particularly a Bitcoin website, use a unique password. A lot of people click on phishing links and they use the same password they use on every website. So even if a third-party website gets hacked, people could use your same email address and same password that you use everywhere else to try and get into your Luno account. I recommend using LastPass or any good password management tool to help with that. And you can enable two-factor authentication. Again, more information on this is in the links at the bottom. Be very cognizant that there's a lot of charlatans out there trying to get you to part with your money. So if there's a lot of Ponzi schemes and fake investment platforms and scams, just take a step back. And if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And of course, they're clear from phishing. Just because somebody says that they are with your bank or with Luno, don't click on any suspicious links. These are the main ways that people lose their Bitcoin. And of course, the risk, I would say, I see we're having a little bit of an audio issue here. I'm just checking if we back on track. I seem to be getting the thumbs up. Just one second. Yeah, so again, apologies to everybody. We really want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So we will mention a little bit more about Ethereum in an email response to everybody. But in short, Ethereum is the second most popular digital currency out there, and it is available on the Luno platform. So in addition to Bitcoin, you can buy Ethereum also on Luno. Okay, so our Q&A and free Bitcoin. So if you want some free Bitcoin, everybody, you can do this right now, is you can open the Luno app, select promotions, and enter the code BTC101. You don't have to do that in all caps. It should autocorrect. And you will click apply code and you'll get a little bit of money in the process. So I'm going to go through some of the questions that you guys submitted here. There were tons of really, really great questions. The first one here is, does Luno aim to be a bank in the future? So yes and no. I think Luno is already a bank. Originally, when we were founded, we realized that Bitcoin's going to be big, and it's a part of the evolution of money. And that it is the business of banks to handle money. The problem is that banks are very slow-moving industries, and as they should be, because they handle enormous amounts of money. So instead of partnering with banks, we said, well, we're going to become a bank, but we're going to become a Bitcoin bank. So right now, we're not looking at a banking license, and we're partnering with banks all around the world. But we see that we are a bank, but albeit one for Bitcoin. Okay, the second question here, a very good one too, is many people say that it is not safe to store Bitcoin on an exchange platform such as Luno. Can you comment on this? That was a really good question. So the answer is yes and no. There is risk in everything. I'm just going to reconnect our video here. I hear that we've got good enough connection. I'm going to say yes and no with should you store your own Bitcoin. If you are, there's no world that exists with absolute security, because absolute security comes at the expense of certain things. You can probably build a fortress where you can't hack someone's house, where you can't get entry into someone's car, but it's going to come at the expense of things. So it's going to be very difficult for you to get in there. So we need to we all live in a world with relative security. So when you have money on a Bitcoin platform like Luno, it means that you are trusting them with your money. So if you are comfortable with trusting us with your money over trusting yourself, then that's probably the right approach. If you feel that you have the technical know-how to secure Bitcoin and move it into your own cold storage facility or hardware wallet, then you should absolutely do that. A lot of people keep money on exchanges because it's more convenient. You can quickly sell it, but it does mean, I want to be clear, it does mean that you have to trust us. Okay, we only have time for 2 more questions here, and the rest of the questions we will answer via email. I'm also getting a note that some of these codes don't work, that some people are having issues with that, but we will send up an update via email or just credit your accounts after the fact. Okay, so let's just have a look here. Two final questions. Is Bitcoin linked to the stock exchange or to gold? And what security underpins it? So nope, it's not. It's freely floating. So Luno is technically an exchange, and there's lots of exchanges around the world. And what happens on those platforms is it connects people who have something with people who want something. So buyers and sellers. And buyers can say, oh, I want to buy Bitcoin. I'm willing to pay X for it. And sellers can go and they can say, oh, I'm willing to accept X for it. And if there's a match, then the transaction happens. So there's exchanges around the world, but it's not pegged to any other currency or anything else. Okay, and then a final question here. And again, thanks. I see there's a lot streaming in. We will get to all of them. We'll frantically work. The last one, also a great one, is how do we know that Bitcoin is not the MySpace of cryptocurrency and that the Facebook is yet to come? This is a fantastic question. And maybe something that I asked myself back in 2013. So it's either too early for Bitcoin was my concern. Like, you know, am I gunning for the wrong horse? it's ultimately something that we won't know what's going to be the one true big digital currency. So far, it proves to be Bitcoin, and that's for a simple reason. It's the reason of network effects. So if you look at other things that we use, like for instance email or keyboards, like this keyboard that you have on your computer is not the fastest way to type, but there's not any manufacturer around the world that's going to say, oh, we're going to change, we're going to add this better keyboard, that everybody can use. You can type faster. Just because of network effects. Everybody uses this, so everybody else uses it. And it becomes self-fulfilling. There's better plugs than those annoying 3-prong plugs that we use in South Africa. And there's better ways to send communication than email, but everybody has email. So Bitcoin now has reached that point, that critical mass, where there are probably better digital currencies out there, ones that are faster or more anonymous. They don't use as much mining power to confirm, but they're very small. And it's like when you're the only person with an email account or a Facebook account, it's not very useful, because why would anybody else use it? But what we've reached now with Bitcoin is that it's so big and so popular that it's almost become unstoppable. That doesn't mean it's not going to change. Digital currencies are technology, so we will see what happens, and whether Bitcoin is still the one 10 years from now. But it's been almost 10 years, and Bitcoin is still going strong. Okay, we are exactly on time here. As I mentioned, we will send some feedback and get feedback from you and send some answers to the other questions. And if there's anything else, reach out to us, say hi to us on social media. And thanks a lot for joining this webinar. This was great. Cheers.